Oh, yeah. We're coming to you live from WRUEN, Tennessee. It's the Scribbling Woman.
I'm Nancy Rue, and you're a scribbling woman too. So welcome back to Women Creating Writerly Lives Together. And I hope you brought a mug of something warm and lovely that makes you want to cup your hands around it and savor. Because today we are reclaiming the romance of our writerly lives. I love the sound of that. Don't you? I mean, the feel of its possibilities. It's like a kiss that's about to happen. But I have to start off by saying I'm troubled. I'm disturbed. I'm downright ticked off, if I'm honest, by the holes that are being poked in the creativity of writers. In 1 hour on Thread, which is kind of a subsidiary of Instagram, and it's a thread for writers, I read all of the following from our fellow authors. Amazon is burying our books. I want to talk about books and writing with like-minded folks, and I get a trickle of views. I post about drinking tea and I get 7,000. Feeling very unseen right now. What if I want to write a book, but I don't want to spend my life on social media trying to build a platform? Without an agent, having 2 small press rejections, no money to properly self-publish, watching everyone else making deal announcements, I'm feeling defeated. What's the point? And perhaps the most troubling one of all, 4 rejections away from this novel dying in the trenches. Well, I get it. I'm currently promoting the Scribbling Woman Interactive Companion, and I've discovered that I can lose entire days creating a reel that 10 people are going to watch. Just a few days ago, I heard myself thinking, does anything I'm doing even matter? Well, that is not where I want to be at all, and neither do you. And it isn't just the marketing thing that makes potholes in our creativity. It's rules about content and craft. Now, these are rules that somebody, we don't know who, makes up and changes every 10 minutes, depending on who you're talking to. Now, here are a few that have been reported to me recently. Never use the word because. Remember to show, not tell. Now, what because has to do with showing or not telling? I don't know, but there you have it. Does anybody read literary indie authors? Does that matter if you're meant to write literary fiction? What is the one trope you're struggling to write? Is that what we want? A story that has all the right tropes, which, quite honestly, I don't even know what the Sam Hill that is. I'll fight you over the Oxford comma. And the response, you'll have to pry the Oxford comma out of my cold, dead hands. I'm sorry, what? This is a ditch worth dying in? Cut out every word that isn't absolutely necessary. Ladies, I think that's called a synopsis. Don't bog your story down with dialogue that doesn't move the plot forward. Okay, so let me get this straight. Even if it reveals important things about the characters, I'm just asking. Not to mention one protracted conversation about whether it's catsup or ketchup. I was really trying hard to care about that. Okay, but the social media pressure and the so-called rules aren't even the worst hole punchers. The worst are aspiring authors attacking their peers. I actually read these things on Instagram. If your book is not pristinely edited, I don't want to read anything else by you. Why are you bragging about 1,000 copies sold? Sell 10,000 and then get back to me. If you have to ask that question, whatever it is, you're not a writer. I was just about in tears, and this necessitated one precious person to post, I am genuinely so sorry that some people on here feel the need to tear you down. It's baffling to see this happening again and again. Now, before we start blaming all this on the state of today's world, our current society, the 21st century publishing situation, and the general feeling that we're all living in dystopia, let's consider the fact that writers have had to deal with this kind of hole poking forever. And I promise this is about to make you feel validated. Consider Jane Austen. She paid for the publishing and the advertising of Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park, and Emma, but not Pride and Prejudice. Her brother was her agent and her publicizing person, spreading the word about her novels in social circles. That's Regency period social media. She was as heavily involved in the publishing process as we indie authors are in ours, reviewing proofs and managing the business dealings. She was into it up to her elbows. Or look at Louisa May Alcott. After being told by one editor that she should stick to her teaching because she couldn't write, she wrote and had published Little Women. When that turned into a bestseller, the pressure was on to make public appearances, and she refused because she knew her readers would be expecting Jo March, and she saw herself as a bitter, middle-aged woman. Women writers have had to deal with the scathing comments from their fellow writers since the dawn of publishing. The very name of the SW community is based on a quote from Nathaniel Hawthorne, which I've told you time and time again. He wrote this to his agent when Harriet Beecher Stowe came out with Uncle Tom's Cabin. America is being inundated by a damned mob of scribbling women. I wish they were forbidden to write on pain of having their faces scarified with oyster shell. Mind you, that came when he couldn't get another publishing gig after the Scarlet Letter. As far back as 17 AD, there has been an awareness of how easily writers can be damaged. The Roman poet Ovid said, "A new idea is delicate. It can be killed by a sneer or a yawn. It can be stabbed to death by a quip and worried to death by a frown on the right person's brow." Is this pushing any buttons for you? It's a real thing, this marketing dilemma, this rigidity in the craft, this ugly competition that erupts from frustrated writers. With so many punctures in this life we've dreamed of, we look like writerly colanders. That isn't okay with me, and it shouldn't be okay with you. We're not having it. If Jane and Louisa May, George Eliot and Charlotte Bronte, even Agatha Christie and Alice Walker could come through as whole writerly women, we can too. We are artists. We need to live artful, writerly lives in every small way we can. And how? In my experience, it's a matter of falling in love and staying in love with our creative pursuits. We need to romance our writerly lives. Now, before we go further, let's be clear on the difference between romancing and romanticizing. Romanticizing is having a rosy vision of how perfect everything used to be or could be. Thinking that our Jane spent peaceful, unworried hours penning Pride and Prejudice only sets us up for discontent with our own writerly lives. That can never be real. Romancing, on the other hand, is very real, and that's what we're about today. Let's live into this the way we do falling in love with another person and letting it bloom into a relationship. While we think of it in terms of a spousal partner kind of thing, much of this can be applied to a deep, satisfying friendship. Okay, those of you who are straight up realists or have been burned by love, this is a romance whose ending you get to decide, no matter how jaded you may have become by life. So trust me on this. We're going to look at this as stepping stones on whatever body of water says romantic to you. You can imagine a quiet stream far from the madding crowd, rapids rushing out from a waterfall, the shore of a gulf at midnight, splashing through puddles. You get to picture this stepping stone thing however you want, and then see what those stones are made of. Is it pure marble or rose petals? Forget literal. This is your vision. Stepping stone number 1, leave the chaperone behind. Whether you see that as the Victorian father who wants to pick out your partner, or the local matchmaker who tells said father who to choose, or the dating site that tells you who's compatible. Escape from it in as daring a way as you need to, and the more romantic, the better. Imagine your creative self standing on the ground below your window as you lower yourself down on a rope of silk sheets, or dashing out the back door and jumping on the back of his Harley and taking off into the sunset. There is no room in anyone's writerly life for whatever stands over you, telling you what you should do, need to do, or haven't done. A trusted guide, yes. But when it comes to determining what you want, that is all up to you. Stepping stone number 2. Once you get to a safe place with your creative self, acknowledge what's hard. You probably know enough about romance novels and rom-com films to get that the naysayers to your artful romance aren't going to give up that easily. There are always obstacles, big and hairy. You have to know what's pursuing you, what's poking the holes in order to avoid it. So make a vomit list. That is exactly what I said. Throw up on the page or vent on a recording that you make on your phone. Spew, spit, and sob at everything that specifically jabs at your writerly self or puts a chokehold on your creativity. See it for what it is. Maybe it's those 15 ads a day on Instagram or Facebook telling you that this or that marketing program, masterclass, publicity program, or writing hack could boost you to the top of the Blockbuster list for just $500, $1,500, $6,000. Or maybe it's those 4 different workshops at that last online writers conference that you took, telling you 4 completely different things about how to write a romance, an epic fantasy, a sci-fi adventure, a children's picture book. Maybe it's your in-laws always asking how close you are to being published. Agents who never respond to your queries even though you did everything right. Realizing that you spend 10 hours this week building a platform and 1 actually writing. Angsting over whether your use of the Oxford comma will make your book look like it was written by AI. Heaven forbid that you should just be literate, but I digress. Go down hard on those bohos disguised as industry standards or things every inspiring author needs to know to get published. Feel free to swear a lot. It's important to do this. Going into a romance still dragging your old baggage dooms that relationship from jump. I personally did a lot of crying this week, filled up copious pages in my journal, and afterward, I felt like you do after you throw up. Shaky, but relieved. Stepping stone number 3. Create a vision of what you want this life together to be, you and your creativity. When you dream with the person you fall in love with, don't you picture how lovely it's going to be? Even good friends love making plans together. Say yes to all those lovely plans. Don't limit yourself with, yeah, but that's impossible. You're not setting up unrealistic expectations for yourself. You're just imagining what you really want and dang it, can have. You can allow your vision to be real for you, have a semblance of the possible, and still create a romance. You know you probably won't procure that Tuscan villa in which to write, although one never knows. You can, however, dream yourself into a corner that everyone knows is off limits for the next hour and make it your own. Simply envision what you can do that isn't happening now. You can, as fellow scribbly Pam Halter, author of The Fairy Eater, did when she spends 3 afternoons a week in a coffee shop. She is now their official author in residence, and they're selling her books there. You can, as fellow scribbly Carolyn Chereau, author of My Personal Holocaust, did, make a demo and then find yourself as a guest on a podcast. You can, as fellow scribbly Abigail Horgosh did, and go to the Realm Makers Conference and make such an impression on someone that that person designed 3 free covers for her Rabbit Hole journaling series. When we are in love, we feel as if we can do just about anything. We become braver. We take more risks. We do the things we do for love. Now, if you're having trouble wrapping your mind around this because maybe it's been a while since you wanted to devour someone with your eyes, perhaps ask yourself some questions. What would allow you to get lost in your writing, even for an hour at a time? Don't let yourself say, but, just picture it. What would allow you to step into your own story as its writer? What experience, what place, what conversation? Do not let yourself say, but I can't. Just imagine it. What would allow you to enjoy this romance with your writerly life? What art supplies, what new knowledge, what indulgence in your quirks, what sharing with people who love that you're in love? A scenario might help today. Lucy is the name of my ideal reader. She's the one that I write for. And she's a writer too. Lucy feels so discouraged by doom scrolling and the snarky critique group and the roommate who tells people she's pretending to be a writer. Then Lucy listens to this podcast. Of course she does. And she decides she's going to give this romance a go. In her imagination, she sees the love of her writerly life waiting outside her door, and they run away together across a field with only the moonlight to guide them. For real, she determines that she's going to find new living arrangements, sans that roommate. In her vision, once she and her creative self find shelter in a cabin designed just for lovers who run away together, they do the vomit thing, filling up 10 pages in her journal, which they subsequently burn over an open fire and watch the sparks dance like tiny cupids. Lucy feels 80% better. This romance is on. Then Lucy and her creative self dream together, planning a life that didn't seem possible yesterday, but is well within their grasp today. Lucy will move into a less expensive loft apartment, which she will turn into her writing studio. She will create her own Instagram community and only allow positive people who want to talk about the writerly life and the magic of telling stories. She'll only show her work to that one fellow writer she trusts, the one who not only points out what she loves about Lucy's writing, but asks helpful questions. She envisions them doing this down at the Bean Me Up coffee shop and attracting some other fellow Scribblies who get it. She'll get up the courage, bolstered by her fellow Scribblies, to ask that guy who always comes in after his fencing practice if she can interview him for some sword play scenes that she's writing. She plans to offer to buy him coffee. Besides, he's borderline hot. Lucy finds herself with a writerly life she can't wait to wake up to. It's not happening on a balcony overlooking the sea with a maid who brings the tea. But isn't a romance that grows in a back table over hot wings and plans just as kiss-worthy? I think so. Stepping stone number 4, what shifts will need to happen for you to claim this romance as your own? Now, we're not talking only about physical changes and adjustments to circumstances. You can easily see once your vision that your vision is in place. You'll know you need to stop looking at social media numbers, or you'll know you need to turn the walk-in closet into your off limits to everybody else writing space, or use the Oxford comma if you bloody well want to. When you go into a relationship with someone, the where we'll live, whose money goes where, and what we're going to do about your interfering mother are obvious things that we can work out with clear results. The shifts I'm referring to are these 3 kinds of things. How will you have to change your view of you in order to maintain this beautiful thing you have with your creative self? No one enjoys being in a partnership where one person is constantly putting themselves down or complaining because things aren't perfect, or always playing it safe so they won't be disappointed. The best partners are those who respect themselves, who have confidence in their own gifts, who aren't afraid to admit when they're not quite there yet and are willing to learn, who can accept that this writerly life is never going to be perfect. When our daughter was in her dating days, I used to say to her, choose a man whose flaws you can live with, because he's going to have them and you're not going to change them. Present company accepted, of course, because Jim has no flaws. Be committed enough to your creative self to look at the self-talk shifts you'll need to make and be ready to seek those changes. Lucy has promised to try not to tell herself she's silly to use a fountain pen. She's also going to stop being embarrassed about what she doesn't already know. The second shift, how might you have to rethink your intentions? When we find that for life partner, we're no longer looking for something better. We're not trying to be a good catch. It's not about making a fabulous impression. Things change, and the same is true for your writerly life. Are you in love with the idea of selling a bajillion books to shut your in-laws up? Probably not. My guess is that you're in love with telling a story that will make someone stop and go, yeah, that. Are you in love with the concept of 10,000 followers on Book Talk? That's nice, but it's not the basis for a love affair. Aren't you actually in love with creating characters whose lives resonate, or poetry that speaks volumes in a single stanza? Are you in love with the thought of snagging an agent by getting that query absolutely correct? That's a love that might go unrequited. Deep down, I bet you're in love with building a world readers can get lost in so they can find themselves. Lucy sets an intention to write as real as she can in the fantasy world she's building. She loves that purpose. She wants to hug it every day. Third shift, how might you need to adjust your rhythm? When we're single, our daily round is free, and yet we're encumbered by having to do all the things ourselves, right? When we begin to do life with a partner, we need a different beat. In falling in love with a writerly life, we may have to slow the process down since we no longer feel the urgency to post as much as possible and get this novel done before we're 35. We may have to savor the writing, allowing it to be delicious, rather than worrying about whether it has all the trendy ingredients. We will need to toss out things that don't allow creativity to flow, like the packed schedule, the ridiculous word count quotas, the deadlines we put on ourselves. Lucy realizes that lovers aren't in a race, they're in a dance. Her dream writerly life is waltzing with her fantasy novel for 3 hours every Saturday morning without looking at the word count or the page numbers. And she's letting her protagonist, whose name is Honoré, set the pace. Our fourth and final shift is away from who you no longer want to be. Falling in love with the right person or finding a kindred spirit in a friend brings out the best in us, our most authentic self. Seeing ourselves in the eyes of that person makes us want to be what they see because we already are. We don't want to be dragged down by the false selves that used to torment us. This applies directly to this romance with our creative selves who we want to spend our writerly lives with. We would do well to complete this sentence. I am no longer a social media addict always looking for an affirmative fix. I am no longer a seeker of numbers. I am no longer dependent on publication to show me I'm a writer. I am no longer comparing myself to other writers. I am no longer the fearful procrastinator. Lucy sees that she no longer wants to be the online courses junkie looking for the hacks that will blah, 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 blah. And she no longer changes her story every time she reads something that they say she should or shouldn't do. Let's get back to our stepping stones. Stepping stone number 5, take care of this romantic relationship. I've been talking about this in terms of the just getting together part of a romance, but anyone who's ever been in a partnership or a long-time friendship knows that once the sparkle becomes the coals that keep the fire going, they have to be tended. Jim and I have been married for 52 years. Our coming together was a whirlwind. The next 15 years were roller coasters, thrilling, but sometimes scary. The last 35-ish have been a deep mellowing that is still full of surprises, most of them coming from Jim, I have to say. It's an ongoing process requiring attention to keep it alive. In the writerly romance, it looks like this. First, it's the fun crush of the very idea of being a writer. Then the realization that writing loves you too. Then the focus on getting to know it, the gift, the work, your process, the obstacles. Then the making of lovely discoveries. You didn't know you had that in you. You didn't know you could do this and this. By the same token, there's the discovery that it isn't going to be always smooth and awesome with no self-doubt. But the staying with it anyway, letting nothing come between you, at least not for long, because you keep reminding yourself why you love it. You can't imagine yourself without it until you realize again and again that you are one. So stop on this stepping stone and ponder how you're going to take care of this writerly life of yours. What do you have to protect it from? How can you keep the delight and the joy in it? How can you give it the time and the space and the attention it needs? What romantic efforts do you have to make so that it will continue to love you back? Lucy is allowing no jealousy to enter into her writerly life. She's celebrating her fellow writers' victories and buying herself a for real calligraphy pen and spending this year's vacation time in her brother-in-law's best friend's cabin in the Blue Ridge so she can write and experience her dreams. Do we need to make ourselves known to the readerly public? Yes. Are we wise to learn what we need to do about the business side of publishing a book? Absolutely. Do we have to risk running into cynical people as we look for our tribe? You bet we do. And If we are living our authentic, romantic, writerly life, we can keep that in perspective rather than allowing it to make stab wounds in our creativity. We simply need to keep firmly in our minds that none of that is worth a thing if we aren't in love with what we do and what we create. Do you remember Kahlil Gibran? He said, and I quote, "All work is empty, save when there is love. Work is love made visible." In my own life, as I've moved from traditional publishing to being an indie author, from the pre-social media days when publishers had marketing teams to the learning curve of being my own marketer, from demanding deadlines to the intentions that I create, I can say to you, with the best of authority, that the writerly life at its authentic best is a portal into the best of us. Isn't that worth romancing? Now, for some guided help with pursuing your dreams, you can count on the Discovering Your Dreams section of the Scribbling Woman Interactive Companion. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, The Scribbling Woman, and we can dream together. And until next time, Scribblies, scribble on.